would like to start this introduction, this presentation, by making a premise. The premise is regarding the universe that we live in and the fact that we live in a spatio-temporal universe. So all living beings, because we are part of a spatio-temporal universe, are actually able to relate to the future. It is something that relates or is related to the way and the whole setup, basically the whole nature even of the universe. So being part of a universe that is including time as one of the fundamental characteristics means that humans are obliged to find ways to take into account the past, the present, and the future. So basically, three attributes of time. So initially, as kids, you might remember, or maybe you have children around you that remind you that kids are actually testing and refining very simple ways to integrate time into their daily lives and also into their perception. So if a baby is crying, the baby will learn that to the crying, something very simple will happen. That is basically being fed. And actually, sorry, I missed one slide. So this is just about illustrating the present, the past, and the future. But what I wanted to show you is this slide that I'm very proud of. So when a baby cries, it learns very fast. The baby learns very fast that food is coming. So also kids learn very, very quickly in life that if they shout, people around them will react, and it takes some time for people around to learn to not react, or like just to forget that kids are crying. But this is another story. Also, crossing the street, something that maybe we'll learn a little bit later than when we are babies. Crossing the street is requiring a certain understanding of anticipation. We need to understand how fast is the car approaching, if we can run across the street or not. So these are all ways that we as humans, as living entities, living beings, are relating to time. And for example, another notorious example is when it looks like it's going to rain, we are going to take an umbrella. But the fact that it looks like it rains, and the fact especially that we have an umbrella, is not actually a guarantee that it will rain. So it might end up in not raining. Maybe the sun is shining. This is something that happens very much in Zurich, but I guess everywhere else too. You might end up just running around with a huge umbrella under the sun, and you might feel a little bit out of place. That's actually because there is no, unfortunately, causal relation to the fact that we have an umbrella and to the rain, because actually past, present, and future, that we like it or not, are not a given. So our actions are actually embedded in what we can describe as a complex universe. And these actions, because they are embedded in a complex universe, might be suspended. So for example, the fact that we take an umbrella will not make it rain. Another example that I wanted to share, maybe for mountaineers out there, when you start climbing a hill and then you think you're very close to the top because you don't see anything behind the top of the hill. But actually, once you get to the top, you realize that you have to climb another 25 hills before you actually end up finishing your hike. So this is to say, this premise is to say that we as humans, we know intuitively that we need to act with the future or with the present. The problem is that we are projecting the future, so the present on the future. So we find it difficult to escape from what I explained in the beginning as this kind of childish understanding or child understanding of time and causation as well. So the fact that if we cry, we will be fed. basically, we tend to understand that we will be safe if we just project the past or the present because it worked into the future. And so this connection that makes us prepared, that makes us feeling safe, is actually one of the reasons why we find it difficult to escape from this mechanism. But actually, as a matter of fact, the future does not exist per se, if you think of it, until it becomes the present. What exists about the future is the connection between the past and the present. And let me reformulate this. What exists about the future is the images of the future that we create. And this is actually the bridge as well from the past to the present and to this future. So because it doesn't exist, the future cannot be known. It cannot be governed until it happens. That is, until turning into the present. And due to its the fact that it doesn't exist, and so the inherent uncertainty, it can certainly not be predicted. But the fact that we have images of the future is important. We have to recognize this because, as I said before, since we are born, we are able and we learn to deal with the present. With the future, and we deal with it in a way that makes into place or uses our what we call anticipatory assumptions, or even anticipatory traits that I will explain a little bit later. What I want to underline here is that the images of the futures that we have often are sort of caged by what? By the projections from the past that we are used to make. So our images of the future are sort of affected. They're not free to be related to this amazing entity that is the future that doesn't even exist, and it only exists as an imagination. Isn't it beautiful? It would be beautiful, but it can, or let's say it is beautiful by itself, but it can be even more beautiful if we are able to break from the cage that is sort of, quote unquote, polluting our images of the future. And the cage is basically what anchors the images to the past. The cage is also what we can call predictive anticipatory systems and processes. So this kind of strong connection from the past to the future. And this is where finally we start talking about future literacy, that as a capability can make a difference, because future literacy allows people to better understand the role that the future has in what they see, in what they do. And as a capability, future literacy, it is empowering the imagination, exactly this cage imagination, to break free from the cage. So future literacy is enhancing, we can say in short, our ability to prepare and to recover and invent, as well as changing are occurring in such a creative universe that is based basically on impermanence and continuous change. And I would like to stress the fact that future literacy is a capability, because it's quite easy to fall into other definitions, or even before I made, in the beginning of the presentation, I mentioned method. Future literacy is actually truly a capability. Then there are methods to learn future literacy, but you can think of it as, for example, we mimic the idea of future literacy, or the idea of future literacy mimics the idea of reading and writing literacy, because actually it is a capability, first of all, that everybody can acquire, but also that everybody should acquire. And it is a skill that is within everybody's reach. Moreover, future literacy is, same as reading and writing, a capability that can really change society. So imagine society prior to learning how to read and write. when people started to learn how to read and write, the change was just unprecedented at every levels of society. So UNESCO has been championing and disseminating future literacy since 2012, quite a few years back, under the lead of Ariel Miller, who is the current head of the future literacy team and at UNESCO. And in its role as what we call a global laboratory of ideas, the future literacy team has demonstrated that people and communities at any level, organizations, government, private and public organization, are capable of becoming more futures literate. And so this process that has been starting already a couple of years back is aimed at democratizing what we call the origins of people's images of the future. So basically opening up the cage that we talked about before. Being conscious that this is opening up new horizons, as I said, as much as reading and writing literacy is doing. So future literacy, together, for example, with the aforementioned reading and writing literacy, is an example of what can be called a change in the condition of change, which is an immense transformation, a really powerful transformation in what people can imagine and therefore can do. Future literacy is really embedding this change, and it is really addressing the urgency even for transformation, and to transform societies and human governance at any level by empowering everybody to use the future in a more efficient way. So it is not just about how to prepare for potential crises or kind of to plan for great challenges, but it is rather about moving beyond a dependency on an illusion of certainty. What I said in the beginning, the fact that planning and thinking that we can govern the future makes us feel secure because we feel we have a plan, and we have the illusion that things will not change and will go as we plan them. For example, it will rain because I have an umbrella. This is an illusion, and this illusion of certainty is actually creating a lot of fragility, or it has a fragility that is inherent to it. So with future literacy, we help everybody, starting from the individual to societies and organizations, to move beyond this strong dependency from this sort of certainty illusion. So I think it's quite clear why future literacy is important, because first of all, it makes it easier to understand changes in a universe that is under constant change, and especially when those changes are hidden by being too focused or too narrow on two types of future that might actually be kind of quite normal to think about for people. So one future is the one that is kind of involving what I said before, the projection from the past. So it has always been working like this, so it will continue working like that for the next millennia. Or even more interesting, the futures that are used to plan, but that are basically imposing the idea that we have of the future today on the future. So it's like a double future. We are caging the future by imagining a future today. And this is also a projection. So what we can say about future literacy is that being futures literate is empowering the imagination, and that therefore future literacy is essential in systems of change, because it basically equips everybody with the ability to be open to differences and to difference in, again, a constantly changing world and universe. So before I mentioned very quickly anticipatory systems and processes, and this is basically related to the fact that we engage with futures through anticipatory assumptions. So what we can say about the anticipatory assumptions about that underpin future literacy is that generally they are quite, or usually they are invisible. And the reason for this is because people are not aware of why and how they are using the future. And also, I will introduce you later to a tool to acquire future literacy that are future literacy labs. And they are also a means for us to research around anticipatory assumptions. So as you can see in this table that is taken from the book written by Riel Miller, anticipatory assumptions can be rooted in actually many different aspects. And commonly, or most commonly, the anticipatory assumptions that we are automatically tapping into are rooting into what we call planning or preparation. So future literacy, future literacy as a capability is actually aimed at going beyond. And first of all, understanding the origins of anticipatory assumptions, and we do it through, for example, through the future literacy labs, but also learning to go beyond these anticipatory assumptions that you find AA1 and AA2, the ones that are really rooted into planning, or that basically are creating the images, the caged images that we discussed before. We, as I said before, we really need to, or it would be very useful for everybody to go beyond the simple being reactionary or kind of having a simplistic view of the universe. And how do we get to a world that is more futures literate? Also, I talk about futures exactly because the fact that one doesn't exist means that ideally plenty can exist in our imagination, of course. So as I mentioned before, one tool to acquire futures literacy are the future literacy laboratories. I talk too fast, so I don't say futures, but you don't hear it, but it's there, futures literacy laboratories, which I will probably start calling FLLs so that, it's easier for everybody to hear. So FLLs are action learning experiences that are exactly aiming at acquiring futures literacy as a capability through what we call a process of collective intelligence knowledge creation. So that means that they are highly collaborative experiences where participants are creating, overcoming and creating new images of the futures together. So what is also important is that the design principles that are underpinning the creation of the FLLs have been actually shaped by a lot or a very extensive experimentation. For more than a decade, UNESCO has been testing, field testing even these labs across the world, and they have proven to be very adaptable and also very effective. The idea is that everyone and everywhere, regardless of the context or the topic, can actually design a lab to fit for their circumstances. What happens in a lab? So labs are a way to introduce people to futures literacy because they kickstart this what we call a learning voyage to become more futures literate. And there is no limit to the number of future literacy lab that one can go through or can enjoy and participate into. Actually, it's the more the better. Secondly, the labs are generating new thoughts about the most pressing topics, generally the topic of a lab, but also a set of topics that arise through a lab. So we can say that the labs are helping people to generate or to ask themselves first new questions about the future. Then we can also, we observe that a lab has a an FLL has a really direct impact on people and agenda of organizations, because it expands what we call the menu of choices that are available to decision makers, from leaders in public and private sectors to also community members and students. So everybody can see their menu of available choices expand, and therefore everybody can change their agenda for change. And last but not least, as I mentioned before, the labs, FLLs, are a research tool as well. So through FLLs, UNESCO and everybody who is conducting FLLs and participating into them are able to advance the scientific research into why and how people are using the future, so are generating certain anticipatory assumptions in specific contexts. So we are also basically part of an experiment. And the hypothesis is exactly related to the fact that people use the future differently in different contexts. So we can essentially talk about the FLLs in respect or as a learning voyage. I will just kind of enumerate these six steps, six things that happen in a future literacy lab. There is more to it, but unfortunately, the thing about FLLs is that the best way is to experience them. It's like really like reading and writing, or even meditating. I can explain you what's meditation for 1 hour, but until you don't try it, or reading and writing the same thing, until you don't try it, it's a bit hard to grasp. But nevertheless, FLLs are helping people reveal and becoming conscious about the way that the future plays a central role in what people perceive. And so then it also changes the perspective to the present. Secondly, participants are starting in the second phase, or in a second step, are starting to realize that continuously they are engaging in anticipatory thinking, and they are actually able to imagining images of the future, and therefore of futures. At the later stage, then participants are able to develop insights and to understand that imagining different futures can actually change the way that they see the present. There is a high component of invention. So participants then become aware after, in the middle of the lab actually, of their own capacity to invent the underlying assumptions. So to go beyond the ones that were pre-configured, or the kind of squared assumptions that we talked about in the beginning. Participants then typically begin to assess or reassess their perceptions of the present, and also the figures and the depictions of the past, and therefore the aspirations of the future and the questions for the future. So we can say in the last stages of a lab, new questions are surfacing. And number 6 is actually the step that we really wish for everybody to grasp, because once somebody has gone through a lab, we can say they can acquire the capacity to not only to participate, but of course to themselves design and implement an FLL, actually independently of UNESCO or working together with UNESCO. So basically all this material and the setup that I just explained is completely open source, and generally we work together with local champions across the world. I think some of you might be on the call today. I saw somebody already just joining from across the world, and basically the idea behind the FLLs are based on a train the trainer framework, so that once people have been participating and also facilitating a lab, they can take the kind of the structure and develop it further themselves or apply it themselves. And of course, we as UNESCO are always happy to help in the background. I am not a number person, but this is an easy number. So since 2012, UNESCO has been doing more than 100 labs. I'm making it round for simplicity across all the continents. And the team of Futures Literacy is devoted really to disseminating this capability across the world. As I said before, the Future Literacy Labs are one tool. And I think what is important to say is that future literacy as a capability can also bridge other forms of futures thinking and complement them. I would be very interested in hearing from you actually at this point how it spoke to you, and if you knew it already, or if there is any specific questions that kind of came into mind. I try to be quite brief. There is a lot into the whole discipline and the whole capability around future literacy. So I hope that it was clear. I thank you so much for your attention. I know that it's well, in European time it's 7 in the evening, so maybe you want to go for dinner. So thank you so much, and to everybody also from the rest of the world.